Welcome to Deep Look, Ultiworld's weekly podcast about the latest in the ultimate world. I'm the host and the editor, Charlie Eisenhood. Joining me, Ultiworld senior editor Keith Rayner on this Tuesday, July 30th. The Olympics are in full swing at this point, Keith, and the international competition in Ultimate is also, we're just getting started for this season. U20's wrapping up over the weekend, and Keith, it was a doozy. It was quite the results.
It was, and it is funny to kind of like have it coincide with the Olympics. It's like we can just pretend, we can just pretend that we're in it. We're up in there doing our international thing, and yeah, an exciting tournament, which is not always what we've said about these world championships in the past, but it feels like we've had enough of these in a row where we're getting great events that you could really say that Ultimate has a highly competitive international global scene.
Once you get to semis. But yes, I agree. So congratulations to the champions in the Open division. The USA takes it down. And in the mixed division, we also get a USA victory. But in the women's division, France upsetting the U.S., avenging a kind of heartbreaking loss from earlier in the tournament. A game that in power pools, France led 10-4 before losing 14-13. But it was kind of all France in the final. We'll talk more about it in a little bit. But what a victory for the French women. The U.S. has always done well at U20s, but they have often not gotten the sweeps. And that was the case here in 2024. More to come in just a moment. Make sure you give us a like and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts, or maybe you're watching us live right here on YouTube, noon Eastern, every single Tuesday. And we are ready for our trivia question of the week.
All right, so we're bringing it back. By popular demand, this week's trivia question of the week will be another edition of Guess the Player. Is not Rico Johnson, but shout out to Rico first in the chat. So show love there. But yeah, we're gonna play a little Guess the Player, Charlie. I know that you had fun guessing last time.
This was fun. Yeah, this was fun.
We'll see if you can pull it off this time. And like last time, this player is another player with a D3 background. They have 4 club nationals appearances, all with the same team. And they are top 15 all time in the UFA in blocks.
Top 15 all time in the UFA in blocks. Oh my gosh.
Those are your 3 hints to start. Let me know when you need another one.
Four club nationals appearances.
4 club nationals appearances, all with the same team, and a top 15 all time in UFA and blocks.
I don't know if these guys went to D3 colleges. But my first thought is Drosts, because they've been to nationals a few times with Exist. Mike played with Pony, but Ryan didn't. So I'm going to say Ryan Drost is my answer. And he is also top 2 all-time in blocks. I don't know if he went to a D3 college, though.
It is not Ryan Drost. There's a guess in the chat for Brett Holzmeyer. It is also not Brett Holzmeyer. So I'll give you another
UAH is not D3. Maybe he went to a D3 undergrad, though.
I'll give you another hint.
I need another hint.
So this person was the player of the year in 2015 in D3. And they are also top 10 in the UFA in plus minus and top 5 in points played.
Okay, wait a minute. Top
get you closer.
10 in plus minus and top 5 in points played?
Yes.
Oh, God. I definitely should be able to get this.
One who's been around for a while.
Trying to think
I got
about like
one more set of hints for you.
block leader, current top 10 this season.
No, all time.
All time.
Career.
All time. Got it. Okay, hang on. Block leader all time. Top 10 plus minus all time. Are they still in the league? Let me just ask that.
This person is no longer in the league.
Okay. I'm drawing a blank. I feel like I should definitely be able to get it, but I don't think.
All right,
hang on. The only person I can think of. But where did Goose go to college? Goose is kind of my guess right now, but that's only because. But he probably went to. Well, maybe he only went with Machine. So I'll guess Goose.
Goose is a great guess. Someone in the chat also guessed Goose, and Goose is very closely associated with this player, I think, because also a D3 player. I'm pretty sure. I think he played at Wheaton. I want to say Goose, but Goose also played on Machine with this player, who played his D3 ball at Indiana Wesleyan.
Oh, he just retired from the league. It's Travis Carpenter. I should have known. Once we were talking about player of the year, I just completely blanked on that. I knew Goose didn't win player of the year in 20 whatever. Travis Carpenter just retired from the UFA. I saw that this week.
Yes, Travis Carpenter is the answer. It is Travis Carpenter. Andrew Hilliard got it on that last set of hints as well in the chat. So that is your player this week, Travis Carpenter. We'll see if we've got another guess the player coming up. Maybe next episode, maybe 2 weeks from now. We'll see.
Okay, I love it. Good one. It's time to welcome in our friend and commentating colleague Tom Stiles from the UK. I mean, he's basically in retirement at this point as a commentator, but he came out of retirement this weekend briefly, and it was quite the doozy. Tom, welcome to the program.
Thank you very much. It's great to be here. And yes, I'm out of retirement because we were filming all of the finals on the, and I got a text message from leading the commentary team. If I do one game, can you send this mixed bronze match? And I was like, okay, fine, that one game. But if there was ever a game to persuade me not to come out of retirement, that was it.
Well, we'll get to that in a second. Hungary, Singapore, bronze medal match with a lot of. It was a wild game. We'll talk about it, but I want to start by talking about just your experience at U20s this year. I mean, we've seen some really great tournaments in the UK on the international stage the last couple of years. U24s a year ago, and now World Juniors. How was the tournament experience for you? The days that you were there, and it must have been so much fun to see France win. I just would love your thoughts on that.
Yeah, so I was there on the opening day because I ran the opening ceremony. Brilliant. So much excitement. You know, the opening ceremony, everybody wins at the opening ceremony. It doesn't matter where team are going to be amazing all week. It's just a celebration of being together, the ultimate doing what they do. So lots of flag waving, lots of nice speeches from the nice people at Birmingham City University. They had a marching band, which really set the tone and got everybody pumped up. So that was fantastic. And then I watched some of the games during the week online. A lot of games were, as you would expect, full games, international tournaments. There's a lot of one-sided matchups. But then the finals, they got really close. So we saw some semi-finals on Friday. And I was pitch side announcing all of the games on Saturday. So I got all of those very, very up close. And I thought I'm excited about French Ultimate. I think French Junior Ultimate, having two teams in the final in the Open division and then in the women's division, which they went ahead and won. That's really exciting. I think the Canada UA mixed team. I think those are the two countries that they don't drop a lot of depth into their mixed division. They've got the depth in their squads and their women's squads, that they can together a really, really strong mixed team. But I was excited for the mixed division because it was the biggest division of the tournament. There was a lot of countries that can't necessarily get enough players to put together a strong open side or a strong women's side, but they can put together a reasonable mixed side. So certainly a lot of countries that don't necessarily have that depth at the junior level were competitive at the at the mixed side. And then you've got like the outliers, or relatively small Ultimate Nation, 3 sides. They sent open, women's, and mixed to the tournament, and they were competitive across all 3 divisions. So, yeah, but did you watch the French USA women's final, Charlie?
I did. I watched it start to finish.
Yeah, it was quite out, I thought, and tactically they played an absolute blinder. They really loaded their lines for the first few points. They had a couple of big players switch over from the D line, and they started the game with 3. And I think that did 2 things. One, it obviously gives you a numerical advantage on the scoreboard, but 2, it really clear in the USA O-line, and the French defensive was tight. And I think reading some of the USA, I think some of the USA players thought it was consistently too tight. Not sure I agree with that, but that was definitely what they were trying to do. They were trying to play a tight zone, and they did, and it upset the women the way the USA women wanted to play pretty much completely.
Well, you got right to it with the success that we saw from France in multiple divisions. They already had risen up as a very competitive national scene, particularly at the U20 level. Are we, given that we're seeing this for so many young players in France, Tom, do you feel like we're seeing kind of the rise of a potential ultimate power in France?
Women's team, like the top end of their roster is seriously good, but it's got to be said that both of those both the open side and the women's side were playing quite short rosters in the final, and they've probably got 7 or 8 superstars, and then it drops off quite quickly. Well, frankly, I don't know how quickly it drops off, because there was a lot of players we just didn't see in the finals. But that's how the big teams play these big tournaments. Is you quite often get players who play in the rounds, but don't play in the finals. But there's some, the stat. Look at the stats board. You can see quite how heavily weighted it is towards their superstars. But yeah, particularly the women, they've got some depth there, and their top end of that roster is seriously impressive. And let's hope for European Ultimate, for World Ultimate's sake, that we've got like a rising power, and those players find it in themselves to make their way onto club sides and open sides for the future.
12 players for France recorded positive counting stats in the final. 13 players for the U.S. recorded positive counting stats. So I'm not counting those who only had turnovers. There were a couple players on each team that only had turnovers. But I think what you say is clearly true. Keith and I have kind of been debating whether the U.S. should have been more aggressive in putting their best players on the field even more than they did. There were noticeable points, I thought, where we didn't see Chloe Hakimi on the field, who I thought was easily the U.S.'s best player this week. And she was not out there for critical D points. And I'm not really talking about like the very end of the game when they were already down, 3 or 4, and they would have had to have some kind of miraculous run to get back into the game. But like earlier on, Chloe Hakimi not on the field for D points. And I was kind of thinking we need to see more Hakimi points, because they simply need people to move the ball. If they get a turnover, they didn't have the offense from their standard D line to go out and score on that French O line. I'm curious what you thought, Tom.
Well, I would 100% agree with you that Hakimi was outstanding. But I would say she did put in a shift. She was on the field a lot already, and every time she was on, she was involved. She was going every other quite a lot of the time. So while we might wanted to see more of her, coaches have got to protect their players and their athletes and not help, make them hurt themselves. But I think to some extent, like how if you're in the coaching seat for the USA women and you don't spot the fact that the French have loaded their lines for the first 3 points, then all of a sudden you find yourself in the wrong chair, in the wrong end of a 3-0 scoreline. Like, is it reasonable for USA to shorten their lines at the very start of the game, like the French did? It would have taken quite a sort of a strong mindset to make that call. They didn't do it, and then they ended up down.
Yeah, after that 3-0 run, sorry, Keith, really quick. The French go up 3-0 with 3 straight breaks. And from that point forward, the game was fairly even. The U.S. got 2 breaks the rest of the way, and the French got 3 breaks the rest of the way. But that early hole was kind of all the difference, and it let France play with a lead and make decisions about substitution patterns that maybe gave them some advantage when they could rest their players, especially late in the second half. Go ahead, Keith.
I'm curious about your impressions from the U.S. women's division team, because we saw them really get tested during the course of the tournament, which isn't totally foreign. It's not uncharted waters, but oftentimes we see the U.S. maybe have one hard game and then they get into semis and finals and everything is kind of rectified. When you were watching this team progress through the tournament, did you have a sense, they're way closer to the rest of the field than we would have thought? Or did you think this is kind of just par for the course and they've got a pretty good chance of just figuring it out by the time they're in semis and finals?
Unfortunately, Keith, I can't answer that question because I didn't see them progress through the tournament. I saw their final. That was the only game I saw. So I was watching. I watched the odd few games during the week to see another USA game. I think just to not take anything, it wasn't just a French tactical victory. They played brilliantly, and some of their deep shots, I mean, they were low percentage deep shots that they just found. They were throwing into the tightest of windows against double marked receivers, and the discs just flown over frustrated American women and straight into a French receiver. And that happened on a number of occasions. And it's like, well, how do you beat a team that's prepared to throw that and then brings it down consistently? It was a tough ask for the US to come away with a win there, and they just didn't quite have it. There was a number of times where the USA were having to lay out to rescue a disc. So the discs were in that 15% margin of error rather than a 5% margin of error, which they needed to be. So there was a few loose passes, and I just felt they wasn't their A game. And the French did play their A game. They brought everything to the party, plus some tactical awareness. That, for me, was the reason why the French took it.
Tom, by the way, what a setting we have. We have a castle behind you. We hear the seagulls in the background as well.
Yeah, so I'm on my way to France. I'm going to spend the next 3 weeks traveling around France with my family, and we're at Dover Castle today because tomorrow we catch the ferry from here. So we thought we'd come down and spend an afternoon looking at some of the history. But they say every Englishman's home is a castle, and this is my castle.
Love it. All right, well, we got to talk to you about the game that you called. Hungary, Singapore, bronze medal match in the mixed division. Hungary coming in with the lowest spirit scores in the tournament into the game. They had already had a game removed from the streaming field for their quarterfinal due to some of the behavioral issues from some of their players. And then we got one of the ugliest games in modern Ultimate history. I mean, it was over 3 hours long. There were 2 extremely long Spirit timeout stoppages. There were inexplicable long stoppages throughout the game for travels and even little ticky-tack stuff. game advisors were getting involved, and we're like talking for 2 minutes about something that nobody even disagrees about. It was a horrendous game. Ultimately, Hungary wins it on Universe 9-8 after more than 3 hours. You had to kind of sit through this game and commentate through extended delays. That was a grueling way to come back into the commentary universe. Just what are some of your initial thoughts about that match? And now that you've had a couple of days to kind of collect your thoughts, and then we can maybe talk about what needs to happen, but like just the game itself, like what was that like?
Yeah, so there was a point about an hour and a half into that where me and realised that for all the wrong reasons, this was going to be a nice game. And when you're a commentator, you don't get to, you just commentate the game that's in front of you. You don't know whether it's going to be a good game or a blowout or there's going to be bad calls or whatever. There was that point where we suddenly went, oh, this is a game, to suddenly, oh, actually, this isn't a historically bad game. We're on the mic for this, and people are going to be listening back. So as much as we're frustrated and annoyed about the play, you need to be professional and calm, and players respect the sport, respect the decisions, respect what people are trying to do to rescue this game. And in some ways, I was quite glad I was there. And some of the other commentators said, we were all exhausted by that. Friday of a week-long tournament, everyone's tired. I was coming in as my first game. In some ways, I was quite glad I was able to help the team out, to just use some experience and take that game. But yeah, it was challenging. And at the end, I was like physically exhausted. I felt to my core that the wrong team had won. I felt to my core that they'd been cheated out. Singaporeans had been cheated out of their victory, regardless of what it says. You could see how devastated Singapore were. That they'd not lost because they played badly. They'd lost because the other team had just been blatantly calling everything, fouling wherever they could, and it was sad. It was really sad. But I think thinking about it more generally, our sport has periodically been punctuated by games of note for the wrong reasons. The Canada-Japan game stands out in everybody's memory as a reason why a whole bunch of things changed in the sport because of that game, because people watched it and went, no, that's not okay. It's not how we want our sport to be. And I think this was another one of them. So yeah, a really significant game for all the wrong reasons. Horrible to watch. I had people messaging me who clearly switched it on, and then couldn't turn it off, even though for most of the time there was no ultimate to watch. We were just watching this kind of very slow motion train wreck, dumpster fire of a game, and it wasn't nice. But do you have what questions have you got? Because we could take this conversation in several different directions, Charlie, and I'm sure you'd like to direct me towards the way you want to frame this, because I've got a lot to say, but I want to hear where you want me to take it.
Well, I can agree that people have a weird fascination with games like this. I mean, that Canada-Japan game is one of the most watched games in Ultimate history, if not the. I commentated on Double Wide and Florida United. That's one of the most watched games in Ulti-World history, and it had a very similar feel to it, even with observers present. So I'm curious. We've seen this type of game crop up in unofficiated play, in play with observers, in play with game advisors. If WIFDIF calls you, says, "Hey Tom, what should we do about this? How do we make this better?" What direction are you pointing them in?
Ooh, that's please don't have WFDF call me up and ask those difficult questions, Keith. Yeah. So, well, there's lots of things to say. Let's set a bit of context. So, firstly, I have had conversations with people at WFDF, which I can't disclose. So I've got some privileged information that I can't talk about here, but I can talk about the stuff that's publicly available, and I can talk about what I saw in that game. And I can talk about the things that the other commentators have seen, not just at this tournament, but at other tournaments. But so that's first thing. Second thing to say is these are kids. as much as this game was awful, of them are 17. There's 14-year-olds on this side. So I don't want there to be like a witch hunt with the kid, because the kids are with coaches and they've clearly been taught that this is okay. There was coach in those spirit timeouts. So there's coaches involved before the game, after the game, all week. So as much as it's like you can't blame the children, you've got to blame the parents. I think there's something to be said about, why did this team think this was an acceptable way to play? So with that context, like what do we do to avoid this? And what I do know is that the tournament, Hungary had been getting, and unfortunately most of this is about Hungary, a little bit of it, most of it is about Hungary. Hungary had been getting really bad spirit scores. They'd had 2 5s and they'd had a 3. And I think the only reason why they'd been allowed to that bronze ball game is because in their semi-final against the USA gave them an 11, which was a really good, reasonable spirit score. So people thought, and there was a lot of double officials standing around that game watching them. They behaved themselves, they played hard, they played fair. So I think if that hadn't happened, I don't think they would have streamed this game. In fact, the game might not have even occurred. They might have just awarded. But they had a good semi. Maybe they're on the mend. And then they came and showed, again, their true colours in this first medal. Really pretty. So what do you do about that? So I think the other thing you've got to look at is, coming into this tournament, the last 3 events where Hungary have competed at junior level, they finished bottom in spirit. So this is not an isolated occurrence for this tournament, and it's not an isolated occurrence for this game. And I know that engagement with the senior leadership at the federation level has occurred and has not been particularly, and I think that's about as much as I can say. So they have been trying to sort of help work this out, but it's come to anything. You arrive into a game that matters, that doesn't seem to care too much about getting low spirit scores, from a country that doesn't seem to care that much about spirit, and then they play a game that seems to care about spirit. What do? I don't think you do very much with the players. I think you've got to address this at a federation level. I think you've got to say, look, this is, if you're going to not play to the rule game, and spirit is the key, is rule number 1 in the ultimate rule book, is all about spirit and who's for it and how it's meant to work. If you can't follow rule 1 in the rule book, you're not playing the game. Because, sportsmen in other sports is a kind of a nice to have. You can have players who are playing a bit dirty, but ultimately they either get so the referee deals with them. In ultimately, it's not a nice to have, it's a prerequisite. And if one team is just not prepared with sportsmanship, they're not prepared to play with spirit of the game, you don't have a game left. So it's absolutely critical that something like this is dealt with. But like I say, because this is ultimate, I want to land that at the feet of the kids playing, because I don't think that. I think you've got to land it with the coach, you've got to land it with the rations, and so that would be my kind of big picture on how do you avoid a problem like this happening again. But I think there's got to be lots of different elements to it, and we can talk about GAs as well if you like, because I think I thought GAs did everything they could in their power. But yeah, what else do you want to ask, Keith or Charlie?
Well, Tom, we would love to continue the conversation, but we are having some audio issues with your connection. So I'm afraid that we're going to have to say thank you and let you go. But Keith and I will continue discussing the GAs. And if you want to hop on the YouTube and get in the chat, we'd love to have some thoughts from you in the chat, because we will be talking about GAs and that system after this. I know that for sure. But thanks so much. Thank you for sitting through that Hungary-Singapore game for all of us. It was very nice to have a familiar voice on the air as we all watched through our fingers to see what was going to happen in that game.
Brilliant. All right. Well, sorry about the audio, Charlie. Thank you very much, Keith. It's been good to see you both, and good luck with the rest of the show.
Thank you, Tom. Appreciate it. Tom Stiles with us here on Deep Look. So yeah, let's dig into it a little bit, Keith. I have thoughts to share, but I kind of want to get your take on this Hungary-Singapore game and what you think. Are there adjustments that need to be made, and what do you think those should be?
Well, to give some context for anybody who hasn't, seen the game or heard a ton about it, this was not a Canada-Japan situation per se. That game was like egregious in the physical nature of the game, and there definitely was some points of heavy contact during this game from both teams. But I think that this game was mostly mired in lengthy calls and discussions, many of which felt unjustified. Hungary had a reputation coming into the game. I think that's always a tough spot to be in because teams are going to be hawkishly they're already on the defensive when you enter into the game. And so I think that was a challenge for both teams to try and navigate. And then you kind of had a perfect storm. Lots of zone defense. Singapore's offense against the zone was often like a lot of crashing, a lot of cuts from behind the disc, those kind of chisel cuts up the line where you're jumping into the space. And that led to different types of contact. It led to, because of they played fast moving, they would hit a lot of give and goes, a lot of kind of throws on the run. That led to a ton of travel calls. We got a bunch of foul calls around the mark where, because the cut's coming from behind, the person's trying to jump around on the mark to get it back in front of them. Those types of calls are going to be way more frequent in zone. And then you also get a bunch of double team calls, which are complicated by the fact that there's people running in and around the cup all the time. So it was kind of just a terrible situation, and it just got exacerbated. I think Singapore got caught up in the call game and the discussion game, and like they let that impact the way that they were trying to officiate the game as they were kind of overtaken by a Hungary team that was playing beyond the bounds. The game itself, Tom referenced feeling like the game was cheated away from Singapore. I mean, Singapore had the disc a step outside the end zone line with a chance to win the game on game point, concluding a point that, despite the fact that there were maybe like 6 turnovers or something like that, took 1 hour, including a spirit timeout and multiple injury timeouts. So it's more that they weren't literally just talking for an hour. There were other things happening. But they throw it in and it's sent back on a travel call that was not a travel. Singapore, like many of the players in this tournament, in my opinion, did travel a lot. But this was not one of those situations. And Hungary was traveling in many of the same ways. So it's hard for me to feel like it was reasonable to call every travel happening, especially, if you're the deep in the zone or whatnot. So there was a lot. And the game concluded. Hungary scores twice. They get out of that goal line situation. They score, and then they catch a huck that's like multiple, like there's a defender underneath it. I don't actually know if they got a piece of it, but it bounces up in the air and the person who is the target of the throw catches it anyway. Some of the Hungary players rip their shirts off. They're flexing. It's hard to tell on the camera if they're literally like flexing at Singapore. It feels a little bit that way. Or if they're just celebrating with each other.
They were clearly taunting.
They were clearly taunting. You get a round of boos from the crowd. And this is perhaps one of the things that was the most concerning to me, was that at that point, the Hungary players are engaging with the crowd. But I also saw what I'm going to assume are coaches, sideline personnel, people not cleated up, not in uniform, who were also gesturing at the crowd, clapping at them, motioning, like bring it kind of stuff. And like Tom said, the people we need to be looking at are the adults in this situation. Like, I'm not going to hold it too much against a 17-year-old for making bad calls. Like, yes, we can do better than that, but that's on the grown-ups to help make sure that players are achieving that. And the fact that this is a long-term trend for Hungary, and you see the grown-ups engaging with people in this way, is a sign that there is a problem that goes beyond the teenagers who are competing in this game. So I'm with Tom that I think that is the problem. And then, like you mentioned, we'll talk about larger potential systemic issues for policing, for adjudicating this type of situation to help make the game work.
All right. Few things. the WFDF, following this game, the next day, announced that there was a unanimous decision from the tournament rules group that the Hungarian mixed team be suspended from juniors effective immediately, which, to be clear, they had already finished all of their games, and that the bronze medal for the mixed division not be awarded during the medal ceremony. They did not give them bronze, but they did not give them the medals during the ceremony. And, even if this feels more symbolic than anything else, I do think it was an appropriate action to take against Hungary, given what we saw during that game, and what we saw from them throughout the tournament. They had easily the lowest spirit score of any team at the event, not just in their division. The thing is, while I agree that there's probably things that you could try to do, can you sanction their organization, the Hungarian Ultimate Organization, maybe bar them from coming to future events unless they complete some series of steps that you need to see? I think that would all be on the table, all be reasonable. But I do think that this also shines a light for me on the inadequacy of the game advisor system. There is no ability for game advisors to do anything of consequence when a game starts to get out of hand. And everybody can point me to all these times when it goes well with game advisors. Well, sure. You can also point me to a million games that go well, regardless of the officiating system that you have, whether it be a referee in the UFA, an observer in the USAU system, a game advisor, or a self-officiated game in Europe. There's plenty of times it goes well. The reason that you need officials is for when things don't go well. And right now, the GA system is no good. It sucks. It's bad. It's not good enough. There's nothing they can do to penalize what is essentially at times blatant cheating from teams, which we saw at times in this bronze medal match. They also tend to be very weak with their opinion about what happened in a situation, which leads to, I think, confusion for players, as well as just like a lack of clarity on what it is they're actually saying. And of course, they can just be overridden at any time by players who just don't want to agree when they do say, I had a very clear view, you did not foul them, and that is my opinion. And they say, well, I think that I did get fouled or whatever. It happens. We've seen it. We've seen players just ignore them blatantly in the last couple of years. I know our colleague Edward Stevens wrote a whole treatise about this problem with GAs when he was down at the Pan American Ultimate Championships last November. And now we're seeing it happen again here. It is not working. And I do think it's very clearly time that, if nothing else, even if you want to keep foul call decisions fully in the hands of the players, game advisors have to be given the ability to card players for cheating or dangerous plays. It has to happen. There is no way in the world that we can continue to allow it to go the way that it is right now. How in the world do we have a 3-hour game? How do we have a 3-hour game? Your officiating system is completely broken if you have a 3-hour game. So I would love to see them just move to observers at the WFDF level. I think we have a long track record of it working well in the US. I think we have a long track record of spirit actually improving in the US over time rather than getting worse. I think spirit at the international level is obviously worse than what we see in USAU competition. And observers do not take the game out of the hands of the players at all, but it does empower them to give yellow cards and to give blue cards if players are making crappy travel calls over and over, and yardage penalties, and actually moving the game along, unlike GAs, which seem to slow it down more than speed it up.
I wonder if Dig would agree that observers don't take the game out of the hands of the players.
Don't cherry pick, Keith.
Yeah, I think that the GA system feels like half measures. As somebody whose name in the chat is GA says 100% agree, I think, with you. it just feels like a half measure that doesn't necessarily help that much. Like if you removed them from this equation, like how different would this game have been? If observers had been there, would the outcome have been more satisfactory? I don't know that I could say that, but I think we would have achieved it
I can
faster.
say it.
we could have
100%.
we could have
would
had the
been better.
unsatisfactory ending a lot faster. I mean, let's say they card two of the people involved or whatever, and somebody gets ejected for like, would that have made this game feel better? I don't necessarily know about that part, especially because I don't think while there was one or two players I think who drew a lot of the focus across the Hungarian team, I don't think that they were the only players involved in a lot of the negative interactions. I think that was something that crossed a number of different people on the team. And one of the things that stinks about this whole situation is that it totally detracts from two teams that it will be great to be celebrating their success. I mean, this Hungary team was really talented, and Singapore, after what we've seen from them at the U24 level, it's a really exciting development to see them have this kind of success internationally. And instead, we're talking about this. I think that observers are better than game advisors. I don't necessarily, like, I understand the argument that people want player control and feel it's important, and maybe these types of games are important to have so that people can learn from it. I imagine that these players on both sides are going to be talking about this a lot, and when they go back and watch the film, they're not going to feel great about it. And so it is a great learning moment, I guess, and that's going to be part of the process of giving the control to players. And I know we've talked about this a number of times with former Ulti-World European editor Ravi Vasudevan and friend of the show, and he speaks really passionately about why player control is so important, and he does, especially for these youth level events. And you got to take the good with the bad. It comes with a cost, and this is the cost that exists. If I had my druthers, like if I had to pick one thing, and I had to pick another, like full officiating or no officiating, I would pick officiating. That's me personally. I understand the point of the other perspective of other people, but the GA system feels like it is a muddy in between that doesn't accomplish the goals of either system.
It made it
just
worse.
Feels bad.
It made it worse. They would come into conversations and extend stoppages about a meaningless call that everybody agreed on for no reason. They're bringing in the translators, then they're having a talk, and then it's 2-minute stoppage for a little bang bang foul call on an upline. It was worse for having the GAs there, not better. And it was just the second Spirit stoppage was unbelievable. 30 minutes for them to come to an agreement to ultimately make the right call, thank goodness. That was Singapore originally trying to keep the disc in a spot where they had turned it over, and two Hungarian players collided. One made the block, and then the male matching player hit his female teammate, knocked her down. I think Singapore called dangerous play. It was a little unclear. We didn't have full audio down on the field, but it took forever for them to get to a resolution. Completely unnecessary. It would have been way better to just have the players say, send it back. I mean, this game would have been better under either system that was not GAs. Mitch Dangler in the chat says observers are much, much better than game advisors. And I will say, I've talked to many folks who have both observed and game advised, that they've worked in the USAU system and they've worked in the WFDF system. And pretty much, I literally do not know if there's been a single time where one of those folks has said to me that they preferred the game advising system. They hate it because they watch players blatantly cheat and there's no recourse. And that is not a good system. It's just not.
There's not really if what you're looking for is recourse to stop cheating, you can't really, there's no way to do that really in the self officiation model. The trade-off is that when you add a third party model, you then agree to abide by their calls regardless of whether or not they are accurate. So the opposite end of the spectrum is bad calls that we turn around and we complain about the refs or the observers taking the game away or whatever. So that's your trade-off there. But ugly game all around. And like I said, I've called games like this. They're going to happen. I've called them under observer system. If if people want to go out there and have a bad experience and create a bad experience through cheating and violations of the rules and negative interactions with people when you're trying to make discussions, long arguments, there's not a lot you can do outside of kick them out of the game to alleviate that. Like, it's going, if people want to achieve that, they can. There's hard
there
to
is.
find a way to stop that.
If there were observers on this game, there would have been blue cards issued for bad travel calls to the point that there were then yardage penalties, and Hungary would have gotten the message. They would have gotten the message. They would have had no choice.
I'm just saying, I've seen observed games that people have still cheated in and really negatively impacted the game.
Of course.
You can't. I
mean, I'm not disagreeing with your fundamental premise that people can just like make bad calls and essentially cheat. I just think it's a lot harder to get away with it if you have an observer there. Anyway.
Yeah, I understand people. Yeah, we could talk about this for maybe we'll take it to the subscriber bonus.
So I want to talk a little bit more about the gold medalists and the finals. Let's come back to the girls game in a second. Let's talk Open. The French Open team makes the final in both Open and women's. USA wins that one 15-11. The USA Open team was just fantastic this week. I'm pretty sure that was their closest game, 15-11. Before that point, oh no, they had a 15-13. I'm sorry, that's the mixed team.
Open? 15-11 was their closest game.
That was their first time giving up double digits. I clicked the wrong link for a second.
Yeah.
They had not given up double digits to that point. What an amazing performance from a really balanced roster.
Definitely a talented team and a balanced team. Although I will say, I actually didn't get to watch a ton of the mixed team, but both the Open and women's division teams, felt like we're a little more dependent on their top players than I'm accustomed to with the US. For the Open team, that felt like Cedar Hines. I mean, he was absolutely torching teams throughout the tournament. France was no exception. He was very, very talented player. But yeah, this final didn't feel that contested. The US was clearly the better side for much of the way.
They almost didn't take Nate De Morgan. Remember that? The coaches did not take this guy.
I knew you were going to bring this up.
It makes me so mad. I mean, it was so obvious that he should have been taken. They're lucky they got an opportunity to bring him onto the team. Unfortunately, Kyle Ford getting hurt opened up that slot. But Nate De Morgan was one of their best players.
He sure was.
But the names we expected to be great were your Oscar Brown, Axel Olsen. You already mentioned the Cedar both stood out from a gameplay standpoint, but also statistically, he was easily the team leader in goals. He had 24 goals. Next best was 9, Braden Morrison. He was just a beast, unstoppable.
Yeah, I also thought a player who stood out to me, maybe a little less of the like obvious going to be star was Marcus Lee. I thought he had a really good tournament in general. And in the final, he also had 3 assists, but I found his performance impressive.
The mixed team also getting the win. They had a couple kind of, I want to say scares, but like tighter games than you might have expected along the way. They did see Canada again in the final. They won 15-11. Nobody had an answer for Sam Grossberg. He was just an absolute monster. 39 combined goals and assists across 9 games. To totally lead the way for this team.
Well, I guess the trend holds all the way through the mixed team then. Grossberg was clearly the driving force, the engine for this US team and put up big numbers after a really exciting HSNI from him. That's not a huge surprise for me. It's a player who's just so explosive right around the disc too. Ella Windmeyer, I thought also was a really key player for them. Big backfield general, someone who can really marshal the offense and bring the disc into play. Great around backhand. So I thought those were probably their 2 standouts, and they got both of their toughest tests from Canada, both in the final and in crossover play, I think, like power pool crossover play. That was one of the few times where they were playing from behind, was in that Canada game. And they
And
came
they were
back
behind
from
late.
11-10. Yeah, they
They
came back from
11-10
11-10,
and
13-12.
13-12.
13-12, and rattled off 3 in a row to win with Ella Widmeyer throwing that last game winner.
Yeah, I mean, I think overall, does it feel like a little bit of a bounce back for Canada just in general? I know they didn't make the final in the other divisions, but they were like among the better teams in every division. They had the second best point diff in the Open division. They were a little bit more middling in the women's division, but they were obviously the second best mixed team.
Yeah, I think with the strength of their mixed division performance, like, you could argue that they were the second best country overall. I think France probably has a pretty good argument. I'd probably side with France for getting a win in one of the divisions, but pretty close, I think, between the two, to be honest.
And then let's go back to this women's game. I know we talked about it with Tom a little bit already, but I would say this is probably the most dominant win I've seen against a U.S. national team at any level that I can remember. Like, we saw the World Games team lose last cycle to Germany. We saw them lose to Colombia, but those were both like tight, close games. This game was actually like not that close. Like, the U.S. never really got traction in the contest. It was pretty decided. And I was very impressed with the French overall. I thought their offense may have been the best O-line kind of like across the tournament when you just look at like how well structured they were, how well practiced they look, the fluidity of their handler set, and then just like an absolute killer downfield in Zoe Forget.
I don't know if I can think of a time in which the U.S. has gone up against a European team and hasn't had, 5 of the 6 best players on the field generally. That is often the case. I guess that maybe that Germany example is one of them at the World Games, but it's not common, I would say. But when you look at the way that France was playing, you mentioned Bourget, Swan Lacoste Lefebvre was awesome. Obviously, Camille Blanc was a real problem for the U.S. Margot Nissen, who turned down an opportunity to play with the U.S., to play with the French, and then goes out and beats them. I mean,
that's a pretty swaggy move.
It really running it back with the French. She actually played with the French team last time around too, and I guess that felt like I want to stick with them, and ended up putting up great numbers, 14 assists and 6 goals on the tournament. And yeah, I mean the French. There's just no doubt. I want to. I know there's been some conversation about the spirit score for the French or whatnot. I did think that there were some calls that I disagreed with on their part, but the fact is they outplayed the U.S. like up and down, and really twice. They had a rough patch against the U.S. in their first matchup, and that was it. Like, otherwise, they outplayed the U.S., and that rough patch cost them the game, let the U.S. back into it. But the fact that they played 2 games against the U.S. and like 85% of that time outplayed them, I think really drives home the fact that they were on the right level to win the gold.
Well, congratulations to all the champions, and super fun tournament to watch. If you haven't had a chance to watch these games, definitely recommend getting yourself a standard or all access subscription, going back, checking it out. We're going to take a break. When we come back, we got to talk UFA playoffs and preview the US Open and YCC coming up this weekend.
Hey, this is Antoine Davis. You take the field with basically 2 things, yourself and your cleats. That's why you need the best on your feet.
For me, I want a grip to handle my change of direction and stick with my person on defense. I want my cleat to be light to help me play long points and accelerate to get to my top speed. That's why I love my toe K cleats. They're specifically designed for Ultimate, with a cleat pattern for the game's sharp cuts and a durable, breathable, supportive build to keep your feet and ankles protected and comfortable for longer. That's why I've been using them for 3 years. They're my best ally on the field. You put your best self on the field, so make sure you're bringing the best with you at tokay-ultimate.com. That's TOKAY-ultimate.com. Tokay, sky the limits.
Whether you're gearing up for a TCT event or Summer League, YCC competition or Masters, Breakmark can help your team get kitted out. Their bundles get you everything your team needs, and each one comes with a free reversible and 5-panel hat. Whatever your game, Breakmark.com is the place to get your team ready this season.
Yes. We are live on YouTube.com every week, Tuesday, noon Eastern. It's now coming up on 1 Eastern. We got a big show today. Lots to talk about, and we're going to get into the first round of the UFA Playoffs. Took place this past weekend. 4 games, the 2-3 in each division facing off. And we kicked off with a doozy, Keith. Saturday at 1, Boston hosting the New York Empire, back-to-back champions, and we had seen Boston really kind of limp into the playoffs after having a really strong season, beating both New York and DC in a weekend. And, New York, though, coming into as the favorite. And Jeff Babbitt did it to him again, Keith. He did it to him again. Jeff Babbitt gets into a dispute about his contract before the season with the Empire, gives him the finger, goes to Boston, outplays them during the season, and then catches a game winner with 1 second on the clock to ice the game over the Pack. I mean, the script writers really nailed this one, Keith.
Yeah, I think we have the clip ready to roll.
Let's roll it. Let's roll it.
Marked by Brownlee. 5 seconds. Tanner Johnson floats into the end
Clean
zone.
huck.
It's a battle at the buzzer, and you better believe Jeff
Nobody
Babbitt
boxed him
lives
out.
for the moment. He's got it with 4 seconds to go.
Hey, restart the clip, please. I want to watch it again, and I want everybody to watch Babbitt here. We can see it here, I guess. It just goes right between everybody. What is everyone thinking? The Empire, you cannot let him get a clean lane to the disc. They should know this. They practiced against him for 20 years.
I mean, you got on the line. You got to be like, hey, your job is to stay between Babbitt and where the disc is going. Like, I don't care about anything else on the field. When they throw that deep ball, just try and stay in front of him. I do think Frank Cable pointed out. He said, I may be biased, and the last name tells you what you need to know. But Orion held back about 4 players. Orion's presence did draw the defense, obviously, and that enabled Babbitt to get into it. So, the advantage of having a bunch of big dudes when you get to throw a line out like what they have, it makes it hard to cover. But they just got overwhelmed in Boston. Wow, I mean, what a moment! You really can't write it any better.
Take a look at this tweet from Tire Biz. Empire still letting Babbitt live rent-free. This is a truly tremendous tweet. Now, so if you don't quite, I mean, obviously you can just sort of get it at the face value, but Babbitt was living rent-free for the Empire. Like, he had a house, and that's what the whole contract dispute was about, because the Empire ownership wanted to put a roommate in his house where he'd been living with his girlfriend. And he was like, I do not want a roommate. And they said, well, sorry, that's the deal. You're getting a free housing situation, and we're not going to just give you this huge house for yourself. We want you to have a roommate now, a fellow teammate. And he was not happy about that. And basically was like, once they started to kind of have a communication breakdown, he asked for a lot of money. I mean, a lot of money. Way above the average American median salary, not just a lot for the AUDL. Oh no, the UFA. And so just a brilliant tweet. I get the buzzer. I deserved it.
Look, you know what New York didn't realize was that Babbitt wasn't asking for a bunch of money to play for New York. He was asking for a bunch of money because he was ransoming their playoff chances. He was like, if you would like to advance in the playoffs, you need to pay this fee because otherwise you're taking this L. Like I'm
Listen,
holding this L at your head.
It is a literal fact that New York would have beaten Boston if Babbitt was still playing for the Empire. I don't even think it's a question.
Well,
it's probably a 4 thing in the matchup. Frank Cable says, I may be biased, guys, but Orion held back about 4 players. Hell yeah, Frank. Epic win. I don't know if I think that Boston's going to be able to do it against DC, but we'll get to our picks in a second. Seattle got an early lead against Oakland and cruised through to a fairly comfortable 23-19 victory in Seattle. They will face Salt Lake. And the Flyers kind of crush a hapless Austin team that was missing a bunch of its best players. That's too bad. No Austin Magic this year. What the hell happened the last year that they had to send in like the killer perfect weekend squad, and then this year they phone it in? To be fair, they got to play Raleigh in Austin last year. And then the Madison Radicals winning in double OT against the Chicago Union, who blew a late lead, Keith. That was a crazy game. Did you get a chance to watch the end of that one?
Only a couple of bits. And that game looked like absolute madness. Pouring, driving rain in the like absolute clutch moments of the game. I don't know if it was like that the whole game, but when it came down to the final moments of the fourth quarter, it was like you could barely see through the camera. Like it was that bad. And Sterling Kanaki is out there just like going nuts, intercepting the like Chicago had the disc with 40 seconds left or something like that. And a chance to salt it away. And Kanaki intercepts a reset. I think he ends up getting the bookends to force OT. Wild game. And wow, Bruce Stevens was rocking, which is crazy for what the weather conditions were. I mean, it was loud.
Yeah, it was hype. And for a Sunday game, at 5:00, like that's a time other teams are going to have like 10 fans. And I think the Radicals, I saw somebody in the Ulti World Discord say it was 1,400 or 1,500 people. People come out. It's awesome. So those Madison will move on to play Minnesota. Keith, let's get our picks in for next week. It's not next week. It's in 2 weeks. They take a week off for the U.S. Open, and then in 2 weeks we'll have the divisional championship games. Who you got? Make your picks.
Can I pull the card and say can I wait? Can we push it to next week? I think I want to see.
We can.
I want to do my research.
Sure. We can do that. There's no reason to rush it because we do have next week so we'll put it on your mind, put it on your plate. We'll think about it. We'll come out with our picks. I made some initial picks.
Instead, let me update you on our most recent picks right now because I've redesigned our picks. So I created a new spreadsheet for the club season, and we're going to put UFA and WJUC everything during the club season period in there.
Okay.
5 points for the winner, 3 points for getting the finalists right, and any other picks that we do, you get 1 point. Charlie with a nice lead at 58-51 over me. So we'll review WJUC. The women's division, we both had USA over France. So we both got that one wrong, got the right finalists, wrong winner. Charlie had France, Canada, Italy, and USA in the finals. In the semis. That's the right lineup. I had Canada and Germany. Not right. In mixed, we both got USA over Canada and nothing else correct. Charlie had Switzerland and Poland in semis, and I had Switzerland and Colombia. And in open, we both had USA over France, which was correct. Charlie had GB and Belgium in the semis, same as me. I had Canada and he had France. That's right. Okay. So Canada was the difference. So Charlie gets the extra point there for getting that right. That's a review of our last week.
However, it does say that you had USA over France in the final, which is not possible since you didn't pick them in semis.
Yeah, I see that. That's probably just a typo in the semis box.
Oh, okay. That makes sense. I'm pretty happy with the picks overall.
Not
sure.
I don't think there's any way to have seen France over US coming.
Yeah, I don't think so. Good stuff. Awesome. And let's see. We're going to take some questions from the chat in a second, but first I want to take us to US Open. We've got the US Open and YCC coming up this weekend out in Denver. Friday, Saturday, Sunday is the adult club competition. Youth club championship starts Saturday and runs through Monday. Lots of live streaming coming your way on ultiworld.com. So it's a great time, if you haven't already, to get yourself a subscription and be able to tune in to all the action from this week. We got 3 games around for most rounds. ESPN is doing the finals for club, so that's pretty much the only games you won't get on UltiWorld. But otherwise, we'll have all the semifinals of US Open, as well as all of the big games for YCCs in the U20 divisions. We do not broadcast U17s. So more information on the streaming schedule coming out basically later today, although we have it, so we can talk about it a little bit here on the air, Keith. Let's focus just on like big picture storylines for US Open rather than trying to go like super deep into every division. 12 teams. And I think, as we've noted before, for me, Keith, one of the big stories has to be that we've got some national teams here. Canada in all 3 divisions, and notably the Australian men's team coming over to play in the men's division.
It should be very exciting to see where those teams at. They should make for some very strong competition. I wouldn't be shocked if any of those teams wins their respective division. Maybe I'd give Canada Open the worst shot with Truck Stop and Machine, the number 1 and number 2 teams in our power rankings in attendance. But we also have Shame and BFG. They've been really strong in the mixed division. AMP was in the finals at PEC East in the women's division. Scandal, Molly Brown, Fury, and Brute Squad, as well as Phoenix, Flipside, Bent. I mean, these are really a lot of the top teams that you're going to see this year. So it's going to be a great test for both these national teams and for these club teams to go up against such strong competition.
I mean, are we missing anybody notable in the women's division? I feel like not. It's pretty much like all the heavy hitters plus Team Canada.
Yeah. Traffic maybe is the only Traffic and Sixers, but that's I guess that's kind of them in Canada.
Team Canada. They're there. They're just combo team.
Yeah. Hey, that seems unfair. We also have Team Mexico,
hang on a second.
in the
Team Mexico. That's cool. That's cool. But like Schwa is the 10 seed. That's how stacked this tournament is. It's going to be awesome. In mixed, most of the heavy hitters, remember that if you're top 4 at nationals, you basically have to go to this tournament if you want to get a bye to regionals. So it's, most teams do it. But I mean, same in men's, right? Truck Stop, Machine, Bravo, Dig, Ring, Pony, Revolver, Rhino, plus Team Canada Open, Australia Open, and then, like Condors is the 11 seed. So this is going to be so much fun. I think it's like very clearly the best tournament to watch before nationals. If you're talking USAU action, I mean, but like this next streak, right? From now through club nationals, you just can't ask for more, right? Got US Open, stacked field this year. We're going to Worlds in about a month in Australia. This is the first one in 8 years. Couldn't be more excited for that. Then we go right into regionals and then club nationals. And hey, if it suits your fancy, World Masters is coming up in November out in California. Great time to watch Ultimate.
And remember, this tournament gave us some absolute bangers last year. So with a field this strong, I think we can expect a little more too.
Yeah, arguably this was like some better games at this tournament than at nationals. Keith, let's take a look at our streaming schedule. Just what are some of your highlights from the first day where we really know the matchups?
Oh well, I think that the game that I'm most excited about from the matchups that we have is it's tough to turn down Fury Brute Squad. Yeah, I think I'd go there. We have Schwa in Canada. We have Australia versus Revolver. We got Canada versus Dig. Fury Brute
Australia
Squad,
versus
Dirty
Revolver
Condors,
is
and
very hype.
mixed state full tie. I think Canada versus Dig is also a great one. I think I'd probably go with Fury Brute Squad. But.
All right, I want you to make your pick in each of these games. Team Canada versus Schwa. I'm going to say Team Canada minus 2.5. Who you got?
I'll take Canada to cover.
I say Schwa covers. Team Canada versus Dig in the men's division. I'm going to say pick 'em.
Give me Dig.
Give me Canada. That's going to be a good one. How about Team Australia versus Revolver? I'm going to go Revolver minus 1.5. Australia
covers.
I will also agree and say Australia covers, but I do not have a good feel. So those games, those 3 games. Oh, sorry, one more. Team Canada versus Lawless Mixed Division. I'm going to say, I don't really know. Canada minus 2.5.
Canada covers.
I take Lawless plus 2.5. But all those games are in the first 2 rounds. So get your calendars out. Put the games in your calendar. So all starts 8:30 Mountain Time on Friday. I'm hyped up. And then of course we'll have,
do we need to make our picks for the tournament?
I guess we do. Yeah, I guess we do.
Right? We're not gonna have another chance.
No, we're not. So let's go finals and winners. I mean, we could go semis. Let's go rapid fire here. I don't want to dwell on this too long. We've got a long show today.
Yeah, I agree. Let's just make our picks.
I've got the men's division pulled up. I'll give you here's my teams. Semis. I'm going Canada, Truck, Dig, Machine.
I'm gonna go Truck, Machine, Bravo, and Dig.
Oh wow, shutting out the international sides. Wow,
it's hard to. I feel bad doing it.
I've got. I'm gonna go Machine over Truck in the final.
Yeah, you're running it back, huh?
Statement tournament for Machine.
I'm gonna do Machine over Dig in the final.
Wow. PEC rematch. We'll see. All right. How about mixed, Keith?
Mixed division, definitely Shame and BFG. I'll take Canada and where's my surprise coming from? How about Canada and Mischief? You're way off the board.
I'm going Shame, BFG, Slow, and Canada. And I've got Shame, BFG final, Shame winner.
I'm gonna take Shame over Canada.
Okay.
All right.
There's some really good players on this Canadian mixed team. Maybe
yes.
Actually, I just looked at their roster again. I take it back. I'm gonna go Shame over Canada as well. I think they're going to win
I
that,
don't like that.
semi over BFG. Sorry.
Okay, then
I looked at the roster.
Give
I
me
was too
Canada
hyped.
over shame. Give me Canada over shame. I'll match your hype and raise you.
Women's division, I'm going. Ooh. Scandal, Molly, Fury, Canada. I guess I'm taking the top 4 seeds. I don't know. I think I'm going to do it, though. I mean, Fury might not get there. Maybe I'm going to go. No, I'm going to go Scandal, Molly, Canada, Phoenix. And I've got Canada, Molly final. Molly wins it.
You got Canada, Molly final?
I do.
Interesting.
You know what's interesting? What's really interesting is that there's crossovers. And like I didn't really account for that too
Yeah,
much.
I'm not. I can't dig all the way.
Like we might get
Molly
Molly Canada crossover game. They could still. I'm sticking with my picks. Just saying that the crossovers could introduce some uncertainty into the semis matchups.
Yeah, I can't even. I'm not gonna try and map out who's going where. Man, I kind of think you picked the same thing as me. I think that's where I was gonna land. So now I don't want to have the same picks, even though we do that all the time. It's not that weird on the show. Okay, let me take Scandal over Canada in the final, and I'll have Molly Brown and Phoenix as my other semifinalists.
Okay. Del Rico wants to know who the last winner, the last 2 years winner is in the mixed division. I'll save you the search.
What team could it be? What little
Amp
trivia
won this
question
15-13 last year over BFG. Hey, listen, come out and prove it, Amp. Come out and prove it. A lot of chatter, but y'all got killed by Austin Disco Club.
I don't know. That's pretty good. Pretty good talk. Like who won the last 2 years. It's pretty good chirp.
All right. So our picks are in the board. Keith, YCC is also happening this weekend. I'm not going to ask you to know anything about U17s. U20s, just give you some notes. Top teams in the boys division, Utah Swarm is the 1 seed, DC 2 seed, Triangle 3, Philly 4. Who you taking? Just pick your winner.
Oh my gosh.
Can Utah run it back? They got that kid. They got that thrower from
oh my gosh, is he on the team?
Thrower. I think he's on the team. Can I recall his name off the top of my head?
It feels like DC versus Utah for me. Like those are the 2 teams that I'm picking between.
I think it was Blake Holt. Is it Blake Holt?
Yeah, I believe that's Blake Holt. I believe is the name you're looking for. Give me Utah. Yeah, I'll take Utah.
I think you got to take Utah. I think you just got to take Utah. I look at the rosters for these other teams, solid, but this Utah
you
side
can see the rosters.
This is like their last year to really to be the dominant team. I don't see another roster that's going to challenge them.
Where'd you find the roster? I didn't even know I could see the rosters.
It's on USAU. Come on, basic stuff. In the girls division,
it's a separate tournament. Got it. Usually it's sometimes it's in the same tournament. Now I got it.
Girls division: Seattle the 1 seed, Oregon the 2, Philly the 3, and Utah the 4. Who you taking? By the way, a lot of the big heavy hitter names for Seattle. Not
yeah.
Not
yeah, I noticed that.
a lot of people who play Worlds are just not playing in general. It's it's a lot to also play YCCs a week later.
Yeah, I think because of that, I'm going to take Oregon.
Oregon's Oregon's a very easy pick to make. Is this the year that Utah
Yeah,
could do it?
Helen Burris, Ollie Bunsen, Fluffy Jones. Like,
Nah, I just looked at the Utah roster. There's no way. Give me Oregon. Sorry.
they might
in the
crush. They might be in crush mode.
They might totally dominate. It's true. Mixed division: Seattle, Oregon, Dallas, and DC. Who you taking? Good name on the Seattle team.
Looking over some rosters. Does Dallas have their U20 players? Eva Hayes, Luke Norby. You know, they were kind of going the right direction last year, and then one of their star players got hurt, and it just totally took the wind out of their sails. So I think that Dallas team could be pretty spicy. I think I'm still gonna take Seattle, but Seattle Dallas great final like feels like it's very possible.
I don't know. Give me Dallas. Concentrating the talent onto one team. I like it. They got some players, and they got a chip on their shoulder in Texas at this point. They have to.
Are you kidding? They for sure do.
All right. So what do we got here? Time for the question of the week. Keith, what do we got?
Watch out for Minnesota in the mixed division. Watch out for Minnesota. I'm just looking at the roster. So low key. Okay. Question of the week. The France win adds another missed gold for the U.S. U20 in the women's division. They're 5 for 12 since 2000, first recorded edition in Ultimate Reference, which is by far the least dominant international division for the U.S. Why is that? That comes from Ravi in Discord.
So wait a minute. 5 for 12, meaning there have been 12 tournaments and the U.S. women have only won 5 of them?
In under 20? Yeah, I guess that tracks.
20 women's and
That's
World
about right.
Juniors.
Yeah. I've only gotten the gold in 5. Does that seem right? Feels like more.
No, it seems crazy, right?
Yeah,
no, I mean, it makes sense
really
there's been 12 tournaments. It makes sense there's been 12
No,
tournaments.
yeah.
But
that part does make sense.
Only winning 5 times is kind of shocking.
Is that even right?
I don't really
it's so low.
I don't really know like how that's really possible. I mean, Canada's been really good. There were some like golden years for Canadian Ultimate, and I assume that a lot of the times that they lost, they were losing to Canada.
Okay, I'm looking at the record. Okay, so since 2000, which is as far back as the USAU site goes, they won they won gold in 2000, then again in 2006, then again in 2010 and 2014. So every other year, that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then they won again in Poland. So it should be 6 of 12. And we didn't have.
Fine. It doesn't change. It doesn't change the story.
Yes, you're right. I'm just making sure that these numbers are right. I think it's 6 of 11.
So who beat them? Who beat them the years they lost? Let's just go through the list. You have it?
Okay. I have to actually look at each one. They lost to Canada in 2004. They finished bronze in 2008, having lost to Japan and Canada. No, just Japan. They lost to Japan. They lost other games, like they lost to Colombia in that year, but not in the late stages. So they lost to Japan in 2008. Then in Ireland in 2012, they lost to Colombia. In Poland in 2016, they lost again to Canada. And then obviously this year they lost to France. Kind of a mixed cast of characters, honestly. They've lost to like 5 different countries.
It's kind of wild. I mean, like, you are talking about a time when there was like really, really strong scenes in Canada and Japan. So like in 2008, I mean, I look at the names of this team and I'm like, how did they lose? Erica Bacon, Sophie Darch, Anna Reed, Paula Seville, Lane Cedar, Anna Snyder, Julia Snyder, Claudia Tajima, Bailey Zahnizer. I'm like, damn, this team is stacked.
I mean, they're all going to
I
look
think
that way, especially because we follow these players throughout their career. We know how good that they get after this fact.
of course. Well, my point is that, like, I don't know. I have a hard time understanding why this would be. I think it's mostly that at the very highest level, there's not enough depth of competition yet in U.S. Youth Ultimate to really bubble up enough top level players that they overwhelm the best other countries' teams, right? So at the club level, I think it happens because we have so many players in the US compared to other communities that, like, our best players may not at the very top end, right? The top 5 players may not be better than the top 5 players from another team, but the 20th player is way better. I don't know if that's necessarily the case at the youth level, where we only have a couple thousand people playing Youth Ultimate in the US.
That's
well,
so
clearly, the
kinda
top
gets
European players are better than the top US players lately.
I don't know. I thought Chloe Hakimi might be the best. It was the best player at the tournament, probably. But I think that the thing to me is that, one, because the real push for quality resources and play in women and girls competition happened later, less of a head start for the U.S. over other countries, who I think, if you took the gaps between when you started to see development for women and girls play, it might just be a smaller gap. That's a theory, I haven't actually looked it up. But I think the bigger thing is that you're drawing from a smaller pool of players. The fact is that far fewer women and girls play Ultimate than men. And so smaller talent pool means that it's more influenced by top level players. And so it's easier for other countries to have 3 or 4 or sometimes even fewer really good players, and that drives play. So when you go up against the Cardenases, who maybe feel like a legendary asterisk, like this is beyond the expectation of anybody, or when you go up against Lacoste Lefebvre and Forget and Blanc, like, you might lose because you're drawing from a smaller talent pool, less depth, so your top players are going to have a bigger impact on the game. That's my theory right now.
I buy it. I also think that in general, there's a lot more practice time for non-US countries. They get reps and have training camp and play together.
That's true in open and mixed. I don't see why that would be the thing that drives the difference.
That's fair. That's fair.
Equal challenge for all 3 divisions.
I agree with that.
But one to keep in mind, and that is a US specific problem. Very few countries have the same size and span of the US and draw from so many different places, have so many different metros to draw from. So I do think that's a unique challenge that the US has to face when preparing these teams. There's no actual way without a lot of money to get players in the same place to practice a lot and play together a lot.
Yep. All right. I believe.
Excellent comment in the chat. Hallie's dad. 2 reasons. 1, not enough Seattle players. Get your pitchforks, everybody. And number 2, not effectively dealing with spirit issues. That's an interesting theory too.
Well, I guess I want Hallie's dad to elaborate on that. Saying
that second one is
the U.S. doesn't deal with the spirit issues of other teams, and we're getting cheated. By the way, the U.S. women gave France a 5 in spirit score, which they should be embarrassed about giving a 5, to be honest. There's nothing wrong with taking silver, and maybe France made some bad calls. They did. There were a couple of bad calls in the game, for sure. But a 5 is your opponent was blatantly cheating the whole game. And I mean, Hungary got a 7 in aggregate. How are you about to give France a 5? That's not a real score. I could see maybe an 8 or a 9, but not a 5.
Wild that the Hungary game against the US, just a totally different ball game. Very strange.
I think it's interesting. I think it has a lot to do with expectations about the meaning of the game. It's easy to play with good spirit when you're in a game that you're going to win, or you're not going to win.
Yeah, I think Hungary, there's probably an element
of make a bunch of cheap calls.
They respect and are fans of some of the American players, I imagine, and that probably helps. And then also, I think you have the Americans looking for terrible spirit. So when they saw even moderately good spirit, they're like, "This is exceptional."
Yeah. Emmett says it sounded like the big issue was double teaming all game and deliberately they didn't stop. I mean, another cue for observers, please. But I don't know. I watched the game. I really didn't feel like it was anything that felt like out of bounds in terms of a normal Ultimate game.
Yeah.
Hallie's dad didn't answer. Come on, Scott. We're going to start wrapping up. So if Scott gets in his answer in, then I'll get to it. Join us for our subscriber bonus segment. It's called Out the Back. It happens live in our Discord immediately following this show. It's going to be a little delayed today because I have to get another recording in before 2 p.m. Eastern. So Keith, just letting you know that right now. What are we doing for sub bonus today? I already forgot.
Well, so we were going to talk about what's the second best Ultimate country in the world, but we may
That's
tackle both that and we may have more thoughts on Hungary versus Singapore and game advisors, and who knows.
Well, we'll take your
spill
questions
into our sub bonus.
Yeah, we'll take your questions and thoughts. Hallie's dad says it's what I said. 2016 is the poster child. So basically, that other teams are cheating us out of it. I'm not going to buy that one.
No, I don't think that's. I think he was saying that the U.S. doesn't respond well when they encounter
when they deal
spirited
like what when they're dealing with somebody being a little chippy.
Yeah, a few bad travel calls, and all of a sudden you're on tilt. I think that's my application. That's what I think.
Okay. College Nationals highlight reels. The women's one is out right now. It's on our YouTube. Go check it out. The men's reel will be out tomorrow. So check it out. Subscribe if you're not already to our YouTube channel. We're live here every week, Tuesday at noon Eastern. For Keith Rayner, I'm Charlie Eisenhood saying so long. We'll talk to you next week right here on Deep Play. Hey, Keith, you got to watch Gold Zone for Olympics. They hired the NFL Red Zone guy. It's honestly sick.
That's good because I'm tired of hearing food talk.